Hello and welcome to today's webinar, where we'll be taking a look at how to use energy data to influence behaviour change and cut costs and carbon. My name is Stephen Kennett and I look after the Cities and Built Environment portfolio here at 2 Degrees. I'm delighted to welcome our presenters today. We have Andrew McMullen, Energy Performance Manager with Tesco, who will be talking about an initiative they have been using to identify energy waste quickly and accurately in stores and use this to engage staff around energy efficiency. We're joined by Sunil Shah of our Chloro Advisory, who will be talking about how disaggregated energy data can be used to change behaviours. Before we begin, I'd just like to remind everyone that you can submit questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A box on the bottom right-hand side of the screen. Just type in your question and press send, and we'll wait till the end before answering as many as we can. Aside, if you should have any technical issues during the presentation, please use the chat box on the right-hand side to send a message, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Without further delay, I'd like to hand over to Andrew, who'll get us started with today's presentation. So where are you, Andrew?
Stephen? Okay. Hi everyone, thanks for attending today. Items we're going to run through in the start. What I'll do is quickly run through the history on Tesco's energy and carbon reduction programme to give the Energy Board some context. I'll then run through the criteria for the Energy Display Board, a little bit about the technical elements of the board and the rollout internally. We'll then go through the results that we found and how we measured them. What we're doing since the rollout, what we plan to do next with the Energy Display Board. I think that will be of interest to all of you, the lessons we learned on the way, and what perhaps we would have done differently. Okay, so here's Tesco. As you can see there, Tesco have got some fairly stringent carbon reduction commitment. We halve our direct carbon emissions to 50% by 2020, be carbon neutral by 2050. It drives all our energy reduction initiatives within Tesco. And the picture that you can see there is one of our zero carbon stores, Ramsey, all of the different pieces of technology that we are trialling. To give a bit of an idea of our carbon emissions breakdown, you can see there that electricity and refrigerants for all of our built estate makes most of our carbon emissions. So that's where we focus most of our attention. A few bits of information for Tesco itself. We have just under 2,500 sites in the UK. We use over 2.5 terawatts of electricity per year, which is nearly 1% of total UK consumption. Since 2007, we've spent over £200 million on energy reduction technologies. And one of the stats that we're quite proud of is that even though our estate has grown by 25% since 2006, we've actually had a decrease in our total consumption. Here, it's a little bit older, but it shows you some of the efforts, or the results of some of our efforts in reducing our carbon. In 2010, we had a 20% reduction in emissions, and the way that we did that was through that large amount of capital spend on energy technology, the natural refrigeration, our renewable energy schemes, and of course making sure that we look at our routines and behaviours, and one of the main tools for that was the energy boards. So I thought I'd get to start, I thought I'd give you a flavour of where we were when we were considering the use of the Energy Display Board. We were around about 2009, 2010, we were looking at them, and at that point we were in quite a good place technically. We had automatic metering in all of our stores with all of that available data. Lights that are above 3,000 square foot, they have additional sub-metering in the areas that are meaningful to go store. The main categories are refrigeration, lighting, ventilating, our hot chicken ovens, and our petrol filling stations. We had an energy champion in each store, again the ones over 3,000 square feet, and that was a fantastic piece of resource from our retail teams. The information we were sending out at that time, we were sending up to the consumption data to each store, and they obviously had budgets, and we were able to KPI them against those budgets. So we had a good engagement with the senior teams within each shop. What we would then do to try and disseminate that information to the rest of the store teams would be to post that data up on a dry whiteboard. The energy champion would do that for us, so all of the staff could see how they were dealing with their energy. And of course, we were backing those messages up with posters and other communications to the store staff. What we were finding was that wasn't really getting us a great deal of cut through. The posters quickly became quite stale. And at the time, we were gaining energy training to stores. When I say internally there, it was an internal team doing it, so it wasn't internal in each shop. It was a central team. There were 6 people doing training at each site, and we obviously picked the ones that were usually most averse to budget. The main issues that we were finding at that time that were this amazing sub-metered and AMR data, and we were using it, and we were getting great results out of it. But the only people that were using it were the energy team themselves, and we were thinking that we should really get that info out to the end users too. We energy champions needed more tools and support. Existing job roles within at the store, and only part of their time was dealt with as an energy champion. And it was important to us that we were given that resource, that we maximise its use. We realised that although we're getting that consumption data out to store managers and they had a budget, they didn't know what they could do with it. They didn't know, it was hard for them to control. So there was a bit of feedback at the time that they had KPI that are green, sometimes they were red, but they didn't know what to do to make it green. And unless they had help from one of the training teams, they felt quite alone. And of course, the only problem with only having 6 people for 1,000 main estate stores was we couldn't go out to all of them. So the training only happened at the worst performing stores. So we were, and that's where the thoughts of an energy display board started to become more and more attractive to us. So with this design brief, we wanted to create a tool that enabled end users to identify energy waste very quickly and accurately. Information needs to be accessible to all of the store colleagues. It's interesting to adhere to different skill sets, and the information needs to be acted upon. You can see that's a picture of our energy display board there. It has a touch screen. You can see at the top it's called Energy Team 5. 5 is something within Tesco where every day the operators of the store and the senior team will meet to discuss the main issues of the day and what they're going to focus on. What we wanted to do was get close to where that Team 5 happens to put this board to make it more relevant to them so they can look at a glance and understand how they're doing for their energy that day. We also had an area where the energy champions can put their photos in. The small green box there at the bottom, the core, those are the 4 main things for a retail outlet for us which consume the most energy, where the end user can have the most impact. So things like not overstocking the fridges, keeping doors closed, that kind of thing. And then bottom right-hand side there is a bullet on how to use the touch screen. So we started. We worked with a company called Energy ICT. You can see their logo down the bottom left-hand side. So they were our partners in actually bringing the sub-metered stuff into something meaningful. They collect all the raw data for us and then aggregate it into the different main subcategories. And they helped us actually create this board too. go on to what you can see on the touch screen now. As you can see, each store's name is there, so they know that they're getting the data for their particular store, and they've got the date and when the screen was last updated. On the left-hand box, you can see the year-to-date energy consumption. So what we wanted to show here was the progression of the store in reducing its carbon output. We measured that purely on electricity, and the carbon emissions elements we didn't add at this point, but because the electricity is their opportunity to input, we felt that this was the most important. On to the next one, you can see here we have a bar graph. We wanted to try and get something that would something to everybody that doesn't usually look at graphs on a regular basis. So we did research and we found that this kind of speedo approach was most popular, and it just, green for good, red for bad, so one could see how they were getting on. The actual versus budget, it was quite simply based on what we forecast for them to use in the year and how they're getting on year to date. The budgets are created through consumer profiles for the last 5 years, and we build in the project impact, because obviously where we're spending up to 50 million a year, that has a significant impact, and so we need the budgets to reflect that. To the actual versus budget, we wanted to give them a kind of a week-on-week view as well, but we want to do something a little bit cleverer with the information. So instead of it just being created on a budget that was quite standardised and done in the year, what we looked at here was to try and bring weather into account, because weather has as much impact as store behaviours, if not more. It has a dynamic forecasting tool based on it. So it looks at the weather for the week, and then it amends that budget for that week, so we can see how that store works, weather taken into account. The next is we were trying to create a little bit of competition here. Say that our stores are put together is they are grouped by size and location. So, for instance, there is a particular group here. There are 24 stores in the group. They're extra formats, so they're large format stores, and they're all in that Midlands part of the country. So they have kind of weather conditions to a certain degree, and they have the same sorts of equipment. So it's a good way for them to benchmark. And as you can see here, you can see the best store in the group, average, what the actual store was doing, and then who the worst was. So we were looking to get excitement within the group there, and to make sure the store director who ran that group was able to see his best and worst performers. Onto the bottom dials, you can see, as I spoke about earlier, the main areas that we would like to concentrate on. So these, we have our profiles and we have had our sub-meters. We know lighting and refrigeration, heating and cooling, etc. should work within each part of the year. And what this does then is, if on actual versus budget for the last 7 days, if they are adverse, they then look down on the bottom dials, and it gives them an idea of where they're missing. So in instance, obviously the petrol station is doing really well, but the refrigerant isn't doing so well. So they can have a look at that and then know, right, okay, so I'm going to get my maintenance team to have a look at the refrigeration system to find out what's going on there. Again, what was that when we found a problem, they make a change, sub of energy in that particular subcategory, and that would go massively into the green. So again, what we do is we check these on a weekly basis, and when a change is made, then we'll match the norm. So then it goes back into the middle, and then they need to do something really clever again to get it heavily into the green. So we're always upping the bar rather than just making one positive change and then resting on our laurels. What you can see there is the show tips button at the bottom. So what I wanted to do is give the give a colleague a chance to understand what it is that they personally can do. So when they show tips, a tips would pop up on the screen to say if you're in your bakery, make sure that you only cook in the designated times, and when you are cooling down or cleaning, that you switch your ovens off, that you switch your extract fans off when you leave for the day, those sorts of things. All of the information that we wanted to put on there, the emphasis being on it being meaningful to all skill levels. On to the technical side now. The display board is a PC with a touch screen. It's a simple thing, and then we've got the large box around it. We have two-way communication, so that as the board evolves, we get a little bit of information coming back, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that later on. We learned a lot about how we would get the information in and out of the stores. As I said, EICT collect all of our AMR and sub-meter data. They make it meaningful, and then they send that information back to the energy board. So we need to find a way of getting that. We had a good way of getting the information to EICT, but then getting it back into the store was a bit of a challenge. So we did some 3G connections, which worked well in areas where we had good coverage. Other areas it didn't. And we plumped for the putting it onto the network itself, the actual in-store IT network. Then we looked an awful lot through the trial at the bits of either the real-time data or the use of consolidated data. So what I mean by that is if you look at an in-house energy screen, when you put on your hairdryer, obviously you can see the instant impact that has on your consumption. You know straight away that's where we're using an awful lot of our energy. What we found when we tried that in a shop is that the miles are flying around all the time, and it's very hard to understanding of where that consumption came from. So with refrigeration, when compressors and things kick in, they do automatically without any human intervention. The consumption would change, throw the dial one way or the other. Similarly for bakeries, when the oven kicks in and out, it will do the same thing. So it didn't really work out well for us. It looked like a sort of a nuclear power station dials, all these things flicking around all over the place. We decided to do a consolidated data daily. So the board gets a once a day download, and it looks at the whole previous day's data. In to the actual rollout, as I said, we wanted to integrate with store routines. So that 5 piece was very key for us. We wanted to locate the board somewhere where it would be hard to ignore, and those 5s we wanted to be close to. Where we couldn't get it near the Team 5, or where in particular stores they would choose different areas of the store to have Team 5s, we put the display board in the next best place in the shop, which was the corridor to the staff room and changing rooms. So, people were going past it 2 or 3 times a day. We put the energy display board into our larger formats, so everything above 3,000 square foot, which is about 1,000 sites. And in regards to the rollout, we did the communications through the energy champions. So we gave them packs, let them know that this was coming and that they would no longer be using the dry boards. We got them ready. We gave them documentation on how to train others how to use the board. We put the booklet in so that it would be nice and easy for people just to walk up, pick up the booklet and understand what the board was for and how to use it. And we also wanted the energy champions, where possible, to get people, group them around the board and then, up some excitement and get them to show them how to use it. So we did a store trial, and that was on that 3G network where we had some good coverage, and was a 3% consumption drop in total consumption of the store. And we were, really, really pleased with this. In all 20 stores, within the energy display board being there was one sort of fuming issue found and rectified. And it was, we were astounded. We excited about this, and we looked at our business case for it. And what we found was the payback would literally only be a couple of months for savings of that magnitude. What we found when we actually did the full was that the savings we got throughout the first year was only 1%. Still absolutely phenomenal savings, and the return on the investment was well within the year. We worked by the difference between 3% and 1%. Looked into it a little bit more deeply. What we found was that it was the 20 stores, each member unit team, which consisted at the time of about 15 people, was getting involved, going down, kind of excitement within the store. All staff were well ready for it when it came, and it was utilised to its maximum. Obviously, in the full 1,000 store rollout, there wasn't that kind of engagement, and those first year savings did suffer because of that. Still results and well worth the intervention. So this year is all about keeping up the momentum. We put these in 2010 and the beginning of 2011. And like anything else, what we found was starting back that it was a little bit of an electronic poster. So showing the same thing, yes, the dials moved, but it became easier and easier to walk past. So what we've been trying to do ever since is change the board on a regular basis to make it look different, to make people stop, and then we can deliver our message more effectively. That's why this particular screen here, this was one of the screenshots from one of the changes we made on the energy display board, and that's why I garishly pink to get that initial eye from the stories. And the other thing we've learned is that always beating the drum on the energy message isn't the best way. So we need to think of what is most important to our store colleagues at the time. This one here was a snapshot from a change in the board that we did this winter. So in around about November time, as the first cold snaps kicked in, we were getting lots of complaints through our maintenance teams about the temperature of the stores. And of course, through their own store rooms is helpful with that store temperature. So keeping loading bays, doors shut, not putting products right by the automatic doors at the front of store so they can actually automatically close. These sorts of things, when you the store staff, that if they do, they'll keep the store warmer and obviously at the same time save an awful lot of gas. Then some good cut through there. They can get to the energy display board information on the button on the bottom right hand side, or they could go and get more information about how to keep their stores warm on the other button. Some of the things we've done is give some heat maps on store so they know where the main areas of energy consumption are, so they can look and make sure that those particular points are in a good place. And then we would have, if they touched on certain parts, it would give additional tips. So again, we've a couple of years down this journey, and we this year have looked at this version. So I'll be talking through this. The changes on it are we have some tabs at the top. So we've got the main home button, home page, but we've also got the How to Use Me tab. So that makes the need now for the paper booklet, and it means the paper booklets regularly got lost, no longer a problem. We have a frequently asked questions page. So through, constantly through this, we've always looked for feedback from stores, so we know what the normal questions are. Classic is, why have you put an energy board that uses energy in my shop when you're trying to save it? And then we can describe to them that it costs £20 a year to run the board, but saves thousands. A Talk to Us page now. So that two-way communication is starting to kick in and become a little bit more real. So what they have there is drop-downs that categorises their question, and then once they get to a point, they write in their question, and through the categorisation, we can send it to the right department within Tesco property teams. As we people that are cautious with utilities at home tend to be more cautious with utilities at work. So it was vital for us to get some tips for home on there too. And on the tips for home tab, it's essentially a load of things that they can get. We took those from the Carbon Trust website, all of the things that they can do and the money that they can save. And another piece here is the store maintenance tab. So this shows what pieces of work are outstanding at site. So if they, on this particular screen, you can see that the heating and cooling is well into the red. They have a look and see if there are any outstanding pieces of work needed to be done on their heating systems, and then they can, break the rods, chase to make sure that that gets done. On to it itself, top left-hand side, we wanted to make that screen change more often, but to keep the energy message. So we got the page on the top left-hand side to talk about what's new. Got the energy budget for the last 7 days this year and previous years, so a little bit more information than the first one, but that core piece is still there. Block, the next one, which is new. So since the start of the Energy version 1, champions have gone away, and we've built energy responsibilities into a line manager's role within the store. So all they have to do checks for their own departments now, and then push the button, the more info button, on the bottom right hand side, and they can see which line managers have done their checks or they haven't. So another good thing to do, because obviously the stores are then KPI against the percentage of completion that they get within each month. With the group so they can see how they're getting on against each other. Then in the bottom we've added one more box. In when we had bakery and hot chicken together, because the bakery and hot chicken managers, or the different managers for both sections, we got lots of feedback. So I'd rather see my own information rather than the bakery and hot chicken combined. A little bit down, again, to make it a little bit more user-friendly, we've put an RSS feed at the bottom, just to pick off on the main news points, and we've put on the test share price on the bottom right-hand side. So next evolution, we want to continually evolve this thing, and the fact that it's a PC-based system gives us that flexibility. So what's next for us? The Team 5, it's not just, obviously not just energy that they talk about. It'd be great if it was, but we'll never get there. I'll always discuss all of the main operational elements of the store. So how the sales budget is looking, what's the waste budget looking like, are there any issues with staff levels, all of those sorts of things. And that's some information from that. So he gets that on his computer, he or she prints it off, and then takes it to the Team 5. What we do is get all the information onto the energy display board. It can use our message quite a lot. It means that the board will be used for operational reasons, and while they're there, it will always default to the energy display screen so that we get our message subliminally, but then at least we've got them looking at the board. The other thing that we've got, the feedback that we had, is even though we've broken down those energy meters into lighting and heating, etc., I'm still saying, well, I still don't really know what to do. I know you've given me my tips. I've looked for those. I still can't find the problem. I'm going to give up. So make information even more specific to them. So investing in some technology where we know how long their doors are open for, and we know how long their house freezer room doors are open for, so we can compare them against each other, and they look at their own store routines and really go to good quality energy saving. Video is another thing that we want to put through. This, because there are obviously 1,000 of them out there, video feeds out means quite a lot of data space on the network, but we're at a point now where we can do that. And because the store management teams have access to computers, what we can do is get messages from our directors to all store staff. And the internet feed will be a useful thing. That's where we're planning to take it next. What lessons did we learn when we went through this? I think because of the difference between the trial group and the actual rollout, better training and engagement for the full rollout would have yielded more results in that first year. Definitely learned the hard way that regular updates are vital. If the board is looking the same for more than a couple of weeks or a month, then the interaction drops down on it massively. The recommendations, really, really vital that we tell them exactly what they should or shouldn't be doing. That's why we want to go down that information with the doors. Keep your doors closed more often. This is the amount of hours that you've got it left open. We had the data network set up to be more capable earlier on than we could have started doing the videos earlier. So that would have been something. And then from a technical perspective, we missed a trick. We didn't put speakers into the energy display board. Again, it would have been great. We're going to retrofit those in for us to be able to get leadership to show videos on them. That is about Stephen.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Really interesting insight there into what Tesco are doing. So I'm now going to hand over to Sunil, who's going to talk about using disaggregated energy data to change behaviours. So over to you, Sunil.
Okay. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Andrew. What I'm going to talk about today is, as Steve mentioned, disaggregated energy data. And I'll start off by giving a general overview in terms of why energy efficiency has become such a high-profile area, and particularly the behavioural change elements associated with it. But I'll focus upon two specific projects that we're involved in. One is looking at data through the life cycle of properties, and the other one is looking at capturing the disaggregated energy specifically from operational buildings. In terms of who we are, Aclara Advisory, we are a sustainability practice. Our specialism is in sustainability within the built environment and properties directly through their life cycles, so from planning through to design, construction, and into operation. Since of the reason why energy efficiency and energy reduction is becoming such a high-profile area, we've known for a long time the energy performance gap that exists within buildings. And that means a building that is designed to a certain energy consumption, its operational energy usage is sometimes 2 to 3 times more than expected in the design stage, and at worst 5 times greater than design stage. So we've got this general understanding that the performance of buildings typically is 2 to 3 times, and at worst 5 times from how we originally envisaged them in design stage. And there's a number of reasons for that, but fundamentally what it means is there's an awful lot of inefficiencies which are starting to be built into these buildings at that design stage. And the design stage will go right the way through the life of a building because it also involves capital investments, refurbishments, and the general changes which you get within existing buildings as well. And all of those can also contribute to energy efficiency and energy savings. So a lot of these drivers are down to the cost savings that can be met, but also increasingly the regulatory pressures which are coming through and reputational risks. And in particular from those sides, we have the Energy Efficiency Directive from the European Union, which came out last June 2012, and that's got to be implemented for all large organisations by 2015. That will involve energy auditing as well as ensuring that there is a reduction in energy consumption year by year across the footprint of an organisation's assets. So we're now starting to move a lot of this into from being just talking about cost savings and good practice into a regulatory activity. And in terms of the areas that we talk around behaviour change is one of the three main areas in terms of carbon reduction, energy reduction in buildings, and efficiency technologies themselves, and also renewable energies that have been able to have buildings that are self-generating in their energy usage as being the other two. But the behaviour change part has probably been the area that has had the least level of attention and the least level of focus that's been placed on it over the last few years. But that is certainly starting to increase, and as Andrew's touched upon as well, there's a number of areas that we start to deal with when we talk about behaviour change. This isn't a one-size-fits-all. This will vary depending upon the culture that an organisation has and the right levers that you need to play in order to drive some of these changes coming through. So a series of them mentioned here, including the likes of the energy champions and the change agents in there, including the nudges and the triggers that need to take place, but also potentially what are the incentives, both from a positive and also a negative perspective. But all of this means you've got to end up having an agile approach which can change as the programme itself changes on site, but also as an organisation's view on the subjects also starts to change. In terms of getting through some of these initial hurdles, probably biggest barrier that we do have from a behavioural perspective is that gap that exists between the intent that individuals have and their ability to be able to make that change happen. An example of that comes through when we start talking about energy efficient or sustainable houses. And there's been a series of surveys that have taken place that say over 85% of people would buy a low carbon and sustainable house if one's available, and yet what we do know is less than 3% of individuals do purchase houses with sustainability, low carbon, as a significant concern for them. Therefore, there's somewhere in the region of 82% of people that say they would, but don't include it as part of their decision-making process. And we have similar sorts of issues from an organisation's perspective. Lots of people say that they're engaged with the subject. Very few of them actually start to make those changes from a behavioural perspective to start to reduce energy, etc. And so what we're starting to look at is some of these motivational requirements in terms of how do we understand the motivations, how do we facilitate those triggers that are in place to end up with the end result, which is enabling staff to make the changes, making it simpler for them to make those changes, and providing that support function for them to do so. So I'll run into the two projects that we're involved in. And the first of these projects is one that we've linked up with a company called Ipsen. And the approach here is around using the disaggregated data, which is collected from buildings, and providing continuous feedback via a number of existing web portals, so whether that's via Twitter or via Facebook and those sorts of forums, to provide real-time information in terms of how energy is being consumed and where some of those changes can start to take place. The mechanism itself, there's a set of buildings which take place, and at the moment the system has been developed predominantly for office and for retail-based organisations. And the data itself is collected in a disaggregated manner. So what that means is the algorithms that have been written as part of the energy data collection process is able to separate out the consumption of energy by individual product types. So we can tell what amount of energy a computer is using versus the printers, versus the lighting, versus the air conditioning systems, and so on. So rather than a block of energy that's being consumed, that block is then broken down into its individual component parts. So it gives you a more accurate representation in terms of the amount of energy and what proportion of that energy is then starting to be used. That links itself up into that continuous feedback loop. That information is able to be provided back to both a management perspective, but also, depending upon the level of disaggregation, down to departments and also down to individuals in terms of the amount of energy which they're consuming and how they're starting to consume that energy itself. We then also are able to provide tips directly in terms of the energy consumption, how it's being consumed, and those tips will then encourage the end user in terms of how they can start to reduce their consumption directly. So that takes us through points 5 and 6 back into point 1, which is the direct energy consumption figures themselves. From that, it's able to get a true reflection in terms of the amount of energy which is then being saved, but also where that energy itself has been saved. The process itself, there's a time at the beginning where the system needs to learn and understand how energy is being consumed in the building, and to be able to reaffirm the algorithms which have been set up so that we can definitively say that they are accurately measuring the right types of equipment that are in place. But we have a time frame of around 3 to 4 months before we're able to start to look at where energy savings can take place and where some of these efficiencies are in place, both from a wider perspective but also from an individual end user perspective. And within 12 months, 9 to 12 months, we're then starting to talk around engaging with the nudge process and provision of specific guidance to engage on significant and dramatic reductions in energy consumption. And a little more just on that feedback loop which we do have. So this is the process of the nudging and the guidance and how that takes place. So that's really so that the customer is aware of the results of the actions which are being taken and how they are starting to progress towards the goals and the baselines that are being made. And again, this is dependent on the customer in terms of whether that's from an organisational perspective, department perspective, or even down to an individual perspective. There is that ability to always have that information in place, which is why you at the present moment in time, how far have you progressed, and how far do you need to go to meet up with the targets that have been set. And that the information that's fed through and drip fed through the process able that understanding take place. In terms of the behaviour change elements directly that are starting to be used as part of this feedback loop, it's a single element, and I think Zary's mentioned, just by having a single activity isn't ever going to be able to deliver or meet up with the end requirements, because a single notice board soon slowly gets forgotten. So where we are starting to focus upon is upon 3 key areas. So actionable activities. So these are the tips or the points of intervention that people need to make to be able to reduce the energy consumption. The data and the meaningful information that's being provided, which is accurate, but also because it's that real-time information, enables you to see when you do make the changes what the implications and the impacts are of those changes. The most important fun is to bring the elements of fun into it. So in manner, we are talking about having a more of a gaming facility associated with this and a points type process that's associated with this. So, individuals can engage more fully with the subject, but also have a sense of fun around it through the game perspective directly. The point elements of this as well is then linked up to prizes, which are then awarded for those who can gain the greatest number of points from the activities that are being performed. Okay, on to the second project that we're engaged with. And there's a website, so it's a web-enabled platform called Carbon Buzz. And some of the details are listed here in terms of what Carbon Buzz is designed to do and how it operates. And this here is it's around uploading information and being able to utilise the data that's been uploaded to be able to compare the performance of your property against a series of other similar buildings as direct comparison, but also on a tracking perspective over a period of time for your own property as well. So it provides that mechanism to be able to define whereabouts you are, whereabouts you need to get to in comparison to other buildings, and track your progress towards that end result. Process is described here, and there's a series of organisations that we're engaged with as part of the Carbon Buzz process, which is a REBA and CIBSE-led programme. But it is that closed loop cycle which starts off at the design stage, goes through the construction, the operation, etc., but also again includes the refurbishment aspects of it and the major upgrades that takes place, back to acquisition and back into design. And a part of this is also about how do we transfer knowledge through that cycle. So the understanding that we have at the design stage of a building is fed into the operational stage, vice versa. How FMs and how end users use a building can also be fed back into the design process. So we should be able to learn more and be able to have better informed new buildings and refurbishments that are taking place. One of the screenshots which is on the Carbon Buzz site itself shows the kind of information that needs to be inputted in for buildings. So it's not a significant amount of information that needs to go in, and it can get entered in either as a whole building or as individual zones within the building itself. But what we are starting to look at is what is the energy consumption for certain parts of the building itself. So for the heating and ventilation, for the lighting, etc., etc., and how does those components compare with similar buildings as well. In terms of how that gets presented and the kinds of information which can be seen, what's shown here is an example building. This is from British Hand's York House project, but it's all been annotated just to show the kind of information that's available and what all of that information means. So the kinds of information that we have here is the building itself which has been presented, but also a comparison of that data set against other typical buildings as well as against standards from CIBSE, that's the TM46 benchmark and also the TM20 benchmark, therefore getting a true understanding of the comparison of the building versus normalised values and against typical other buildings that are taking place. The value of that kind of process and approach is to start to understand how you would compare your building against peer organisations and peer buildings in terms of differential that might be taking place, but also against expected information that is normally used from the design process and what the expected energy consumption profile would be for your building. Now, that's not necessarily a right or a wrong process, but it is adding more information to be able to make informed decisions in terms of where further energy efficiencies can take place, and from a behavioural perspective, how you can start to use this disaggregated data in terms of starting to focus upon certain areas within the building. On through a market survey of the Carbon Buzz platform at the minute. There's two websites which are there, both of them run on SurveyMonkey. One is for users, so those are the individuals who are registered on Carbon Buzz and have used it previously, and the other link is is for non-users, those who have never been to carbon budgets before, but who are aware of the energy performance gap and what that means in terms of energy consumption within buildings. So what I would say is it's to encourage the attendees to go into those surveys, either as a user or as a non-user, and complete the survey. It should take you about 10-15 minutes. There's prizes which includes an iPad to be won as part of that. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sunil. So I know we're quite pressed for time, so we'll go straight into the Q&A session now. And Andrew, I think this one might be a good one for you to start off with. But saying what you've gone through, that's a great model. How do you adapt it if you didn't have sub-meter data, and also if your utility data had a few months time lag?
Yes, that's a tricky one. Until you know what you're consuming, then you're a bit stuck. So I guess at that point, the way I would look at that is to know what the best routines are, or the best ways of operating the building are to achieve energy efficiency. My most recommendation would be to get that data up and in detail, because then you're targeting your actions in the right place.
Okay, great. And a follow-up question to some, they're also asking, have the energy savings been sustained past year one?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So although we've got great metering, where that has a massive impact on consumption profiles, we spend an awful lot of money on energy reduction projects which intermingle in shops. So it's very difficult to see is a behavioural change in decent consumption and a technical change decrease. So we have a team of ridiculously clever analysts that work that out for us, but it's taken an awful lot of time. And the way we've seen the drops is through changes in the boards. So we don't do anything with them for a period of time, because obviously we have other areas to look at. Then we do see an impact in consumption. Then we move more effort into the board, make it fun, put in a competition or whatever it may be. Then the effect kick in again. So it's not something that can just the savings are not sustainable. They have to continue to be worked on.
Sunil, you touched on this in your presentation, but someone's asking, they're curious about what happens when you provide visual energy data, and over time people get air fatigue and it just becomes part of the furniture. Is this something that you've kind of got some thoughts on?
Yes, and I think if you provide the same information in the same formats, then yes, people do switch from that fairly quickly. And you're talking literally of 2 to 3 weeks before the way that you present the information needs to be changed. And really it's around turning it on its head, and that's where we start to use the gaming functions. And that's more about how do you get people to engage, to want to go into the website, to go onto the platform and to start using it, rather than doing it the other way around, where you're constantly prodding somebody to say, have a look at me and have a look at the kind of information that I'm producing. And so lots of effort has gone into switching that around to get people to want to go in. And the only way to really be able to do that is by by using this as that gaming function, the rewards function that's listed in there. So you start to win prizes, you start to get recognition, and it actually means something to individuals when they get engaged as part of the process and the program. And that is then taken away from being an activity that you must perform into something which people are happy to be involved in.
Great, thanks. Question someone else is asking, will you ever fake the data to make everyone think they have to improve? I don't know if you've got a view on that.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think if you did that, then the whole basis of what you're doing goes against how or why you're trying to engage with employees or your audience.
Great. Question here, Andrew. Someone's asking, does adjusting the budget target when the stores improve not demoralise the staff? Do you know that if they make improvements, targets then get harder?
Yeah, so we're lucky that we're in a culture where continuous improvement is the norm. The other thing with it, if I'm honest, because of the way that we only do that on the individual meters, so the HVAC and the lighting, etc. And it's hard to notice, so they'll make a change and improvement will happen. It'll go actively into the green, and then we'll just tail it off until that becomes the norm, because they fixed something that was broken or improved something, so that's now the new norm. I need to look again. It's because it's not the actual numbers, and it's a dial. It's been something that we've had lots of feedback on, saying, well, they made a change, it was brilliant for a couple of weeks, and then it eased off. They accepted it was brilliant. Their